Hey everyone, this is Josh, and today we're going to talk about how to draw faces. Now, I've made a video about this on my YouTube channel quite a while ago, and a lot of things have changed as I've gotten better, so I wanted to update you all with how I do things now. But for this video, especially since this is going to be on Patreon first, don't worry, patrons, it's going to be a Gumroad thing. But yeah, since I looked at, I asked you all where you kind of stand, and it seems like most of you have you're not absolute beginners to art. So I'm going to start off with 3 prerequisites. They're not that big of a deal, but once you meet those, you'll find that this tutorial will be super helpful to you. So the first one is that you should know your fundamentals about perspective and 3D form. That's really going to help you a lot. That's really the ground rule, the basis upon which all of my studies are done and how I draw faces, because they're very complex and I try to get them really clearly aligned. The second thing that you're going to want to make sure you understand is just the basic, the Loomis method arrangements for where the facial features go. Like if you cut the head into, like, there's 5 eyes width for the head. If you cut the head into thirds, you get the brow line, and then you get the bottom of the nose and then the chin, things like that you want to be familiar with already. And it's really easy. There's tons of tutorials and stuff for free out there for you to be able to learn those different proportion measurements. And the last thing, and arguably the most important, is you want to be familiar with the skull. The skull is the biggest determining factor for how a face looks. It's not even the muscles. It's really the skull. There's even genetic and ethnic differences between people and different faces. Those show up in the skull a lot, very clearly. So you want to try to be able to draw a decent skull from imagination. It's really not as hard as it may sound. There's only, maybe 7 to 10 parts you just have to be able to draw. Don't have to look perfect, but as long as you know what's there and where they go, you're going to be able to draw faces a lot better. So let's get into the first thing here. I'm actually going to go ahead and hide our examples. And the first thing I want to talk about is there's some basic shapes and lines that I want you to be able to understand before we get into it. So the first one is going to be basically a half dome. So hidden layer always gets me. Half dome, basically you have, I think a dome is a half sphere. You have a sphere, right? Like this, you want to be able to draw this top part. So basically, let me draw it again. And draw some dots around it. Like, this is really not too complex. You just want to be able to draw something like this, right? Basically a sphere cut in half. This is going to be an important shape. And if you can, try to keep in mind that even though I said sphere, it's not a perfect sphere. It's a little bit elongated in this direction, like this. And that's really going to be important for you to be able to draw relatively quickly, especially with being able to draw these contour lines going around the top like this. Hopefully, this is why the prerequisite is a big deal, because if you can't really visualize what I'm drawing here, then it's going to be a little bit of a tough time. Next thing is going to be the horseshoe shape. You want to be able to draw a basic shape like this. And let me just... that. And then this will be a dotted line. That will be a dotted line. Like this. And that's basically a horseshoe shape. You want to be able to draw that pretty easily. Next up is a cylinder. Really simple. I'm sure you guys know what this is. Being extremely loose here. And yeah, that's a cylinder. Circle on the top and bottom, and you connect them. The next one is going to be a triangle. And so this one is interesting because it's the way I use it when we get to using it is just a 2D shape, but it's really a scalene triangle. And basically what that means is that basically one side is going to be shorter than the other one, not counting the hypotenuse side. So you want to be able to draw this shape, visualizing in 3D. So what I'm doing now is drawing this shape as if it's turning around every single time. So it's like you're looking at it here and it's slowly rotating like this. And so it appears to get wider and wider. And then when you're looking at it head on, it's just straight like this. Let me just add a little bit of a line like that, right? So it's kind of like rotating this way. And now 2 of the most important ones that are going to be a little bit more complex is you want to be able to draw this mask shape. Now, this is a shape that a lot of artists have used, especially me in that first tutorial I did on YouTube, which is basically a trapezoid on top of a triangle. And these are basically proportional alignments where basically you're going to have your eyes here, and then this can be the bottom of your chin. It can be adapted to where you can put this, I believe, right at the bottom of your nose as well. Those can be measurements you can study. And it looks like this from the side view, where this edge is this edge here. So that's a shape you want to be able to draw pretty easily. And I'll show you how to get used to drawing these. A little bit more complex version is, I'm trying to draw a 3/4 one. And you basically add a notch right here because your head is curved forward like this. So you can do that. And usually I just keep the line in between straight or slightly curved. And then this would be a little bit more accurate. So that shape is basically a trapezoid and a triangle, and then the line in between them is where you're going to try to locate your eyes. The last shape you want to be able to use is just basically an ellipse with a target in it. So draw an ellipse like this, and then like that. And that's how I try to plan my faces now. Like, it's been super, super accurate, because then I'll just do a quick demo of everything I'm going to talk about here. You're basically just going to do that. And boom, before you know it, you have a perfect setup for a face, right? This is pretty good, kind of like a mannequin for you to use. Boom. Like that, you can do so many different things with this. I'm going to keep adding stuff. Like, we're going to talk about all these little steps, but as you can see, the most important one is really just going to be that ellipse with a target in it, like that. And then from there, you can kind of visualize all these different things that you've learned about the head from the Loomis method and all that. Being really sloppy now, but that really helps you get an idea of what you're going to be working with for all the heads that we're going to look at. So now we're going to take the example I did really quickly just now, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to show you how to really break that down step by step here. So let's go do a layer in pink. What I like to do is I like to draw the target first. This is really helpful for me. So like I did, I drew, get a pink color. I drew this target shape first, right? And then I drew a line in between to decide where I want the eyes to be. That's what I usually do first. Then I like to add the other line here for the side of the head. So I just imagine a perfectly 90-degree perpendicular line, and that is going to be basically this line here that becomes the side of this cranium part. So even though that's kind of the first step in the beginning, I don't really draw it like that. I just draw the line back and then try to imagine that curved space. And if I were to draw a dotted line, it would look like this, right? Then what I do is I imagine the top side of the head like this, and then I bring that line down perpendicular like that when I draw heads. Now, normally a person's jawbone isn't going to be straight down. It can be depending on the style, but normally it's going to come at an angle like that. So that's what I like to do, is I pull this down at an angle, and drawing this one down first perpendicular to this line helps a lot. So once I do that, I just try to visualize, okay, how do I want this to connect with the bottom of the ellipse we did? Because the top of the ellipse is going to be our head, the top of our head a little bit higher than the hairline, and then the bottom is going to be our chin. And if I were to draw the same thing on the other side, pretend that we can see it, right? And it's easy to find where this is because you just make sure these two lines are parallel, and you make sure these two lines are parallel. It's like we're creating a whole perspective grid just for the head. Remember, and if you're having a hard time figuring out how to draw this line, you just draw one straight down, perpendicular, and then you're like, okay, but it needs to bend out a little bit more forwards. And then, okay, how does this connect? And so here we have the bottom of this horseshoe shape, just like we did here. I'm going to go ahead and make those lines blue so that we know that those lines are not in the foreground, they're in the background. I think it's important to keep them there for the sake of this demonstration. So we drew those lines there. So now you're starting to see how we're really getting a good armature for the head here. Now I'm going to switch to, let's do a green color. And now I'm going to show you how this mask works. So once you do this, this corner doesn't really exist. This corner is like in front of our face. What happens is our eye socket, right, comes in like this and gives us space for our eyes to be. This line doesn't really exist either. Our eyes are sunken behind that. So I'm going to draw a line here. And as you can see, that first line I drew for the head ends up just being directly in the middle of the eyes. I don't really like to do a line for the top of the eye, just because this seems to fit more with the styles that I like to do. And so then I'm going to draw another line for below it, right? And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. Pull it back, and it's going to sit on this same line, but in the background, like this, right? And what really happens is this line isn't perfectly straight. You can also do this to give it some dimension, some curve, because the front of the face isn't exactly flat, but we draw it like that in the beginning to help us out. And then you can also add a curve like this here as well, like I did in the background drawing here. Let me hide this. You can see how I did that there, right? And then let's go back to the red color or the pink color, and then we can know that, okay, the cylinder part sits in the back of the head, right? So if you notice and I turn my head, you'll see this line corresponds to this one right here. And as my glasses line goes back, and then it goes to the widest part of my head in the back. And as soon as you go below that, you can see there's an arc that goes down, right? And so that's basically what's happening here. The head is the widest at this eye line right here. And then it starts to go down, become a cylinder for the neck. But as you notice, my neck doesn't just chop up here. There's this stuff in between my jaw right here and my neck. There's like this stuff where basically your tongue is. So you need to keep that in mind when you're drawing. And depending on the person, you could see it really prominently, or you can see only a little bit of it, depending on how much fat, how old they are, how much that skin is sagging. But you can tend to see that, especially when you're looking at somebody from below. But I'm just gonna, yeah, you can see it still from here at this angle, and you add that little piece there as well. And then if I move this over, you can see we have a really, really good construction for the head like this. It's all those basic components drawn. You can draw these at any angle. You can see how I started this here. It was really sloppy, but you can begin to build it out. And it's all based off of a really strict understanding of how to draw different shapes and perspective. If you want to get a little bit more precise, the back of the head is kind of like chopped off. It's not really a perfect circle here. So we can pull, let's go back to the blue, pull this line back further, just like this. And decide, okay, we want this line to be the back of the head, and then draw something similar to this shape that we have, but in the back. So you can see that line I drew for the head is a little bit inaccurate, like that. And that's pretty much the back of the head there. Now, the things that will change depending on personality and everything is like how tall this line is, not personality, but the character, right? How far this comes out and all that, but this is a really good basis. So what I'm going to do now is just draw the features how I would normally on top of this, and you'll see how it comes together. So one thing that this method is really, really good for, and why it's important, is because the most common issues are with drawing heads are that people tend to skew different parts of the body. So the eyes sit, I'm drawing on that same layer, aren't I? The eyes sit inside of this space here. But the thing is that they need to be aligned. And when you have a line there, it helps you out a lot. As a matter of fact, what I like to do is I will start one eye. And remember, we want to think this cross line is in front. We're drawing the eyes behind them, right? And I'm going to just try to come up with an eye shape that goes around there. And what I'm going to do here is, remember, this is a perpendicular line. We want to keep all the features aligned. So I'm going to start the corner of the eye right here. And this kind of wraps around to the side of the head a little bit. You don't want to think about your eyes sitting exactly on the front of your head. This cutout is here for a reason, and you want to try to think about the eyes having a corner to them. That's going to help you out a lot. The eyes appear to be straight in the front of the head because what happens is your face kind of stops here, but then there's some sides that are like this. So if you look at the person's head from the front, this is their face. The sides of their head do this, and then they go back because these are like your cheekbones here. Actually, your cheekbones are still pretty much in the front of your face, but you've got I think they're called zygomatic bones here, all the way at this side that push your face out wider than it actually is on the front of your face. You can see here, it's wider than it is here. And so when you look at somebody from here, draw an eye, you see their face, their eyes are pretty much here on this edge, and the side of their face adds more width. That's why we have this, that's why everyone kind of goes with the rule that your head is 5 eyes wide, because there's about one more eye on these sides. And normally there's an eye space in between. I drew these really weird. It's not proportional, but typically you have an eye space in between your eyes and then one more eye space. And it's not because your head is that flat. There's an edge to it that gives your head a little bit more thickness so that you have that 5 eye width space right there, right? So that's why I draw the eye curving around that corner here. And I draw that line, horizontal line, to keep things straight. And I keep doing that. So I like to do one for the nose. I like to do one for the mouth. I do one for the eyebrows to keep the front, where the eyebrows end in the front of the face together. And something that will help you out as well is like, okay, we have the center point. This is going to be basically right where your nose connects with the keystone of your head. So you have this line here, and then I'm going to pull this out here, and then this is where we get into this triangle shape, right? This shape is going to set up how we have the rest of our face, like that. So you want to pull this line out to basically the tip of the nose, and then you want to pull it down to the bottom of your chin. And this shape can change. You can have somebody whose nose is all the way up here like this. You can have somebody whose nose is all the way down like that, based on different styles. But you want to pull that out. So remember, this initial flat shape that we drew is basically the in-between point. And it's basically right here. Let me take my glasses off for you guys. Right here. This is how deep the first ellipse that we draw. It's not all the way here. It's not all the way out in front of the nose. It's not even here where the forehead is. It's right here where your nose, the bridge of your nose connects. I hope you can see this. Connects, because I can't see right now. Connects to your head right here. That is where that plane is. And so what we do is we start to add the features behind that plane or in front of that plane. We did the eyes behind it. Now we're adding the keystone here. The forehead is going to come out a little bit in front. Remember why we curved this out? Because we know it comes out a little bit more. So let me adjust that. We curve that out. I'm drawing the center line now. This is going to be approximately where the nose is. You want to make sure you don't draw this line like this, because it has to be, again, perpendicular. Your nose doesn't come out at an angle. It goes out straight. So in order to do that, we can think about, okay, this line is going to be the same, is going to be parallel to this one. And so we can kind of use that as a guide, and we can see that I need to adjust. If I didn't draw that line correctly, if I want that to be the tip of the nose, it would have to come out here. And I believe that's a little bit too far. So that means I need to change how far that goes out, right? So those little things are things that even I still forget sometimes, but you always want to be thinking in perspective and keeping things straight and aligned. And this is what makes faces look good, because no matter how weird your proportions might be, your face is going to be correct. It's going to be believable. And so that's what makes your face looks good. You could end up drawing a goblin instead of a pretty princess one day, but at least it's going to look like a great goblin character, right? Instead of looking like something that's not human. So now I'm just trying to draw eyebrows around the head. I'm really bad at drawing eyebrows. And these are going to be a little bit further out because, eyebrows are sitting on the brow ridge, which protects your eye. So that's going to be about right there, right along this surface here for the center line there. And they're going to have a little bit of a curve to them at this angle. Eyebrows are really important for you to learn to draw well because they can help you set up the rest of the face. And then for the nose here, like we said, I like to add a little circle for the top here to help me visualize where things are going. And then usually the lips line up with this. Like as you draw that line down, you can have the lips and the other features line up exactly. But I'm just going to pull them back a little bit. And remember, like we drew this perpendicular line here to the center line. So what I like to do is I like to just start off with the edges of the mouth along that line, because your mouth can do all kinds of things in the middle, but the corners of your mouth are going to be aligned almost all the time, unless you're trying to do this weird expression where or you're smiling with one side of your face, but normally they're going to be aligned, right? Then you can come in and do the center shape like this, because your lips come out from the center plane. Then you can pull this back, which is your bottom lip. And I like to do another line there to know that that's there. And I can pull that out there to be the, I think, Cupid's arrow, some part of it looks like an arrow. Then we can do this little divot here for the lips. Then this goes back. And then we can do a little bit of a curve for the chin right there. The nose, I just did a little triangle like that, but we know the nose has some width to it, but it's going to come back to this edge, right? So I'm going to just pick a point here that looks about right. And I'm going to draw a little bit of a edge right there. And we basically just drew the bottom part of the nostril right here. But nobody's nose is perfectly like facing the ground when they're looking forward. It faces a little bit out, right? So I'm going to change that angle a little bit like that. Again, this is going to be a little bit challenging if you're really new, a beginner at this. So I'm going to do some examples on, actually that's starting to look weird now. I'm going to do some examples on a few different types of faces. We're going to trace over them so that you can see what I'm talking about. Draw a line here just to get a flow for the nose here. And then what I like to do is just draw one line for the eyelid like this. And then the eyes, you can basically do whatever you want, anime style, whatever. I like to just do big cartoony eyes. Pull this back, and then we get the cheekbone coming out. And then you can do whatever you want here. You can give them big cheeks, shallow cheeks, make them look really skinny and emaciated. Just gonna try to go for the most default, average looking face here. Pretty androgynous looking with how big the eyes are. And then your hairline is going to be around here, a little bit lower than the top of that ellipse that we drew. The ear is going to kind of wrap around this point. You can think of this as another target. And so it's going to kind of wrap around like this. Like that. And this, you don't always draw the line for the jawbone like that, but I'm just doing it here for demonstration purposes. And then we can draw the rest of the head. And then if I hide the underdrawing, you can see I drew the neck a little bit too thin. But you can see we've got a face, right? And everything's lined up and it looks correct like we did. And that was just from imagination. I was teaching as I did this, so I have no idea what type of person this is, but it's just a completely blank normal face. Eyes are pretty big, but that's just a stylistic choice. You can make them smaller, but it is a fairly accurate looking head with the features in correct depth with each other. So I'll say again, the issues that you're going to find when you're drawing heads are going to be kind of three things. A lot of times you're going to notice that you'll draw the eyes like this, right? Not that exaggerated, but a lot of times you'll see the nose doesn't line up or the mouth doesn't line up when it should. A lot of times you're also going to see that what doesn't line up is that the features will be the wrong depth. So when you look at somebody from profile, you might see that the eyebrow here lines up with the eye, which doesn't make sense. The eyebrow should be in front of the eye. You might see that the mouth is right here. All the features here, the mouth and the chin and the nose are all lined up together. That's going to look a little odd. A lot of times you'll also see that perspectives will change. So you see how I drew this eye at this perspective, not on a flat angle like this, right? If I were to draw, this is a flat eye looking from directly head on. This is at an angle. Sometimes you'll see that you'll draw somebody at an angle like this, but you'll draw the other eye flat like that. And that is what makes faces look weird. But if you follow this approach where you build things up, keeping perspective in mind, you won't make those mistakes. And then the last mistake is usually that things won't be aligned in this direction. So you'll see that one eye will be sunken in further than the other one, right? That's something that I tend to see, especially these are all mistakes that I make all the time. Those are things that you'll see trip people up a lot. What I recommend for you to study is to draw a head-on angle, draw a 3/4 angle, and then draw a profile, right? Draw those and then learn to draw those and then learn to draw them from above and below. So that will basically be an effect of 9 different angles. You'll be able to draw 1, 2, 3 angles and then all from above and then all from below, giving you 9. Then once you have those are going to be your core head angles. And then you can start to do like 105 degrees, 75 degrees, 60 degrees, 30 or 45, 30 degrees tends to be the 3/4. Then you'll draw 15 degrees. All of those tend to be really common angles, but as long as you master those first 9, you'll be really good to go. Just what does the head look like from above from those 3 angles? What does the head look like from below from those 3 angles? So now I want to go into a really basic overview of different ethnicities. How I approach this is basically I see there's basically 2 types of things you need to keep in mind. There's shallow skulls and there's deep skulls. So European Caucasians tend to have the deeper skulls with the very prominent eyebrows and the very deep set eyes. And then if you go all the way to the Eastern world, you see people with very shallow, their cheekbones will be pulled up forward, so their faces appear much flatter. And that's going to be the biggest difference you see between different types of people's faces. If you go to African faces, they tend to be somewhere in the middle, but they can have some variations. And then for every other ethnicity I've seen is basically some play between that. If we go into facial features, they're all just different versions. But what I've noticed is that the biggest difference between facial features is that East Asians can have something called a monolid where, let me move this over so we can compare it. Where if we look at her eyes, we can see the eyebrow or the eyelid sinking under, right? It's kind of tucked under. We have this and then it's going in and then it comes back out, right? If we go to her, it's hidden for almost the entire way. We have it happening here, but notice that this is much flatter compared to hers. It's very round and bulbous. And then as soon as we get over here, it's just one. It's all hidden under there, right? It's very prominent here. It's just one. And then this is kind of like this flat space. It's not even really similar to how it works here. So if we look at her eye, this is another variation where it doesn't really sink in that much. It all comes out and it's just one shape like this. So that's another variation. But the biggest change is like a completely different eye. So if you draw this type of eye on any face, they tend to immediately look like they're Asian, right? Because it's a very, very prominent feature. Even this person, right? This is kind of just a flat one that doesn't sink in. So That's why, all these variations are, from my perspective, it's all dependent on flatness and depth. How deep is it or how shallow is the face really changes the different races that you're going to see there. So that's going to be it for the instruction part of this tutorial. I'm going to talk about the homework that I want you to do, but I'm also going to provide a demo video of me going through all of these heads for the faces, and then a few more. We're going to also look at how to do it with a real skull and a stylized face, because that's going to be part of your homework. Because the best way is going to be to trace, copy, and then go to imagination. So I want you to trace this diagram, and then the features onto 3 faces, just like here. Then what you're going to do is copy them. So you're going to look at a face, maybe a different one, and then you're going to do this again. Then you're going to do that for 3 different faces. Then you're going to try to do this from imagination for 3 different angles. So you're going to end up with 9 heads for your homework. 3 of them that are traced, 3 of them from just looking at a reference, copying it, and then 3 from imagination. What I'll do in the demo is show you how to trace them, because I'm the most concerned with that one. And it's really all you need to do. Like, you'll look at me drawing at any of my drawings, especially for the lower tier. You can have access to those videos and you'll see how I draw normally. But I want to make sure you understand how to trace these things properly, because a lot of times when I give tracing homeworks, people just trace along the shape of the face. And that's not really what I want you to do. I want you to actually build this armature around the face as a reference, almost, to where what you draw ends up looking different. And it should look really good. It should look like a very appealing drawing, because you've whittled away all the unnecessary details of this face, for example, and then you're going to see you get a very clear, concrete diagram that you can use to study from later. And I'll show you how to do that. I'll do that with all the images that you're seeing here in the demo. All right, so I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's homework. Thank you so much for being a patron or purchasing this from Gumroad. I really appreciate it. And of course, please feel free to leave me any comments or advice or suggestions for tutorials in the future. And I will see you all in the next one. Peace.